Hello and welcome to another deck profile. Today it's Onomat, I think it's called. It's the deck that is Gagaga, Gogogo, Dododo, and Zubaba. I've been playing this deck for a while now, and it's actually a good deal of fun, and it can make some pretty cool boards, and then pretty consistently OTK on turn 2. So it's quite cool, but of course it has its issues. It gets absolutely destroyed by Nibiru, as all combo decks right now, basically. And also it requires quite a few combo pieces to run, but you also play a bunch of combo pieces, but it does mean that you can play a lot of non-engine cards. So it's sort of similar to DDD, where it consistently makes its boards, but when it's going second, it struggles because it can't interrupt your opponent. You can't interrupt your opponent because you're not able to play a lot of hand traps. But nonetheless, I'm going to give you my profile and then show you some combos afterwards. So let's get started. First, we play 3 Utopic Onomatopoeia. I'm just going to call this card Utopic because it makes it so much easier. So firstly, this card is part of all the 4 archetypes. It's part of Gagaga, Gogogo, Dododo, and Zubaba. And once per turn you can special summon up to one of all those archetypes from your hand, so up to 4 monsters. But for the rest of the turn after using that effect, you cannot summon monsters from the extra deck except Xyz, which is not that huge of a problem. But this card is really good because you just vomit your entire hand and then make a bunch of Xyz plays, which is fantastic. But also the fact that it counts for all the archetypes is so good, because all the other cards either require one of the other of their same to be on the field, basically, or summon another. Then 3 Pancho, with Zubababancho Gagagacoat. So this card might be the best in the deck, honestly. So firstly, he can special summon himself if you control another Gagaga or Zubaba that is not another copy of itself. And then once per turn, you can special summon Gogogo or Dododo from your grave. But also for the rest of the turn after using that effect, you can't summon from the extra deck except Xyz. Again, not a huge issue. But yeah, it's so good. And also what you usually do is summon this via his own effect and then use Utopic's effect. So if this gets Veilered, you're not like, oh shit. I mean, the order doesn't usually matter, but summon this and then you can make some plays before you use this. That's what I'm saying. Because a lot of the time you want to hold off that effect, because sometimes you search something else that you can summon with this, but I'll explain, I'll show you later. And then 3 Dodododwarf Gogogoglove. This card is also really good. So he has an effect on the field where he can summon a Gagaga or Zubaba monster from your hand. And then when he's in the graveyard, you can special summon him if you control another Dododo or Gogogo monster, but banish him when he leaves the field. Not a huge issue, of course, because we want to overlay with him anyway. But also the summon from hand effect also sort of helps with making Xyz before you use Utopic's effect. So you could technically normal summon this and then use him to summon Utopic. So you have an Xyz without using Utopic's effect also. This is a great card, and you summon this 3 times a turn usually. Then 3 Dododo Witch. This is one of the only older ones that I play, and mainly she's just a level 4 and has Dododo in her name. There's another new one that's level 6, and he can special summon him as a level 4 if only your opponent controls monsters, but I want to go first. So this is better, basically. You'll see why I wanted another Dododo later, but anyway, what this does is when it's normal or special summoned, you can summon a Dododo monster from your hand, and yeah, that's it basically. It's not once per turn, not that it matters. Oh, and she can summon herself. The effect is not usually relevant, except that it does the same thing as Glove, where you can summon her to summon Utopic. But otherwise it's not really relevant, it's just that like she's a Dododo name in level 4. And then one Gogogo Gigas. So he says when he's in the grave and you special summon a Gogogo monster, you can special summon him as well. It's hard once per turn and you cannot conduct a battle phase the turn you use that effect. It's quite easy to get off because Dwarf can special summon himself, and it also triggers if you summon him with Utopic, if you can get him in the grave before that, or when you get him back with Pancho, so there's a whole bunch of ways to trigger it. Of course, losing the battle phase sucks, but you only use it turn 1 anyway, that's why you also why you only play 1. And it's a rock, so it's searchable with Granite. That's also why you don't need to run more, because you search it mid-combo, basically. But also, Dwarf is also a rock, so if you have this, you search Dwarf instead. And then I play 3 Winder and 1 Bezel chip. Usually, when people play Time Thieves, they don't play the Winder now, because he does nothing unless you draw him, so he's like really just an extender that you can draw. So if you don't have, like, if you don't want to make space for that, you could play like hand traps instead of this. But he's such a blowout card in this deck because there are times where you're like, okay, I can't make this Xyz because I can't detach from it now or don't want to. Like say, okay, yeah, you made your Dweller or whatever, so you don't have an Xyz anymore that you can detach on your turn. But you want one of the materials in grave. That actually happens with this deck, and for that, the Winder is brilliant because not only does he detach one of them, but he special summons himself and searches a counter trap. And we always go into the Time Thief Xyz anyway, so the trap's always live. But Bezel Chip is a great extender also, and it's basically searchable. You can do it with every hand, and then it's a DD Crow on your opponent's turn also. So Ship is fantastic, but it's a Garnet to draw. I played 2 Ghost Ogre. Honestly, I hate playing 2 of this, and I wish I could make space for a third one, but I don't want to. Like, there's nothing else that I wanted to cut because, as I said, this deck needs quite a few combo pieces to function properly. So if you draw a bunch of non-engine cards, your hand is dead, or has a very, very bad result, basically. So I'm playing 8 non-engine cards right now, and this is the maximum that I wanted to play, and the third Ogre would have been the 9th one. So yeah. But I think Ogre is also like the best hand trap to play 2 of, because if you draw it as your 6th card, it's not dead, because you can still like pop something that your opponent uses to interrupt you on your turn. As for spells, I play 3 Onomatopaira. This card is fantastic. You discard 1 card to search any combination of 2 monsters, and then like 1 Zubaba, 1 Gagaga, 1 Gogogo, or 1 Dododo. So you always search 2 monsters, and you basically search 2 combo pieces. So usually you draw 2, you use this, you have 4, and then you can go off. It's hard once per turn though, but it's activate once per turn, so if your opponent negates it and you have a second one, you can still use it. Or negates the activation. If they ash it, you can't. And we can actually search it with Onomatopickup. Upon activation, it just searches an Onomat card, which is either Para or Utopic. These are the only ones I play. So whichever one you don't have, you search. If you have neither, you search Para, because Para can search Utopic. Then it has another effect that's not really relevant, but basically you like target one of your archetype monsters and then make all monsters you control that level. But I only play level 4s except for Ghost Ogre, so it doesn't really matter unless I have to normal a Ghost Ogre, which has never happened. But like if you have an opponent's monster that they've given you like a kaiju or whatever, you can turn it into level 4 and overlay with it. But usually it's just for consistency to get to your combo pieces. I play 3 Dodododraw, which is just a miracle draw for Dododos, and it's hard once per turn. That's why I wanted to play the Witch, so I have 9 cards to discard with this, but it just like helps to thin out your deck, draw into more combo pieces, and like ditching is not really an issue here because whatever you ditch you can revive with Pancho, and if you discard Dwarf it can even special summon itself, so it's a great card. I also play 3 Desires because basically everything in here is 3-0s. The only cards that like I would care about banishing is Gigas, but you can still make a combo without them. And then like the Time Thief, Traps, and Bezel chip. But even if you banish them, it's still fine, and it like you'd rather just have a combo that's not as good than not have a combo at all. So yeah, definitely wouldn't play any less than 3 of this. Same with this, 3 Called by the Grave. As I said, this deck like needs a lot of combo pieces, so you need your combos to go off, and especially like you need to be able to search your combo pieces. So if they ash your para and you only have 2 combo pieces, then you need to call this, so you can get your plays off. 1 Rhoda, Utopic, Pancho, and Witch, they're all warrior, so also searches your most important combo pieces. Foolish, just sending a Dwarf or a Gigas is really good, or sometimes if you don't have access to Utopic, you can send it with this and then revive it with Pancho. Reborn, self-explanatory. Gagagarevenge, which is like premature burial for Gagagas. You just like summon one from grave, equip this to it, and then when it's used as an Xyz material, and this card gets sent to grave because of it, all Xyz monsters you control gain 300 attack permanently, which is cute, but is not really great. And I found that like when I played multiples, every hand that I had like 2 of this, my hand was shit, because like 1 and 3 combo pieces usually still makes the combo, but 2 and 2 combo pieces usually doesn't like give you a combo where using this would get you anywhere. Because like if you have 2 monsters and you make an Xyz with it, detach 1 and summon it back with this, you still can't go anywhere from there. So that's why I only play 1. It's also like sort of the 40th card, so this could also be like the 3rd Ghost Ogre or whatever. And then I just play 1 Flyback and 1 Retrograde. As I said, like if you don't play the Winery, you don't have to play Retrograde. You could still even play like a 2nd Flyback if you really wanted to, but yeah, I like it like this. As for the extra deck, I play 1 Perpetua and 1 Redoer. These are just like such a good combo, and they provide so much. This gives you like a spot removal by detaching Flyback to Redoer. Redoer actually helps you extending your combos, because a lot of the time you have Gigas and Dwarf and didn't use either effect. So you make Redoer with both, just banish himself, so they both go into the grave and you can use them to make a 2nd Xyz. And then Perpetua also gives you access to Bezel chip, so you have another extender and then a DD Crow on your opponent's turn. Plus, like, Flyback is also a DD Crow after you detach it from Redoer. Then 1 Gallant Granite. As I mentioned before, it searches Gigas or Dwarf. It's just like a good extender also, where it's usually like the first Xyz that you make. because Gigas also extends you, and then you'll see how it works when I show you the combo. One Dweller, it's the best XDs going first right now, so you make it almost every time going first, and yeah. One Ouroboros. I make this sometimes, not all the time, but like there is times where you're like, okay, especially with Bezel chip, where you're like, okay, I could make an Xyz with 2 materials and leave the Bezel chip, or make this, detach the Bezel chip, and then summon it back with Perpetua in the standby phase, which sort of like is the same thing, except that Bezel chip is not banished when it leaves the field. And actually stealing card from your opponent's hand is not bad, so when you use it, it's usually good, but you know, you don't use it in every game. Same with this Tornado Dragon. Sometimes I make this going first if it's against the right deck, but it doesn't come up super often. This actually comes up quite a lot. Light Dragon Anti-Gnister. I cut Castell for this because a friend suggested it. It's just untargeting removal, except that it destroys and not shuffles, and it can only destroy monsters, which is meh. But it also has protection effect, a protection effect where if a card would be destroyed, you can just attach 1 to protect it. So I make this going first sometimes, which is weird, but you know. Baguska, I very rarely make this because usually you want more than 1 Xyz. So like, this is something that you make with a dead hand, basically. I played the old Utopia package because I really didn't want to make space for double or nothing, so we don't play Utopia double. That still helps with OTKs. I played 2 F-Zero. You'll see why in a second, but realistically you could play 1. I want to test the new Bujin link, Bujinki Ashima, I think she's called, over the second one. But in the testing that I've did so far, she seems to be sort of like plus minus nothing. She doesn't really add much, except that there are some boards. Like sometimes even your board gets worse when you make her, and then sometimes there's boards where it's the same thing, but you have an Akashima on the field. So you can like use the quick effect to pop something on your opponent's turn by like putting her above your redoer, for example, or pointing to your redoer. So I'm sort of iffy about her so far. Maybe I'll find a combo where she's really good and then I put her in for sure. But so far, I've been running with the second F-Zero because it actually comes up every now and then. But the reason that we play it is because of this guy, Gagaga Magician. So he has an effect that you can detach 1 material to special summon in non-number Xyz from your graveyard. Its effects are negated, but it's so cool, helps with OTKs. And then there's it has another effect when it's the material of an F-Zero, or a Utopic Future, I guess, of a Utopic Future Xyz, where you can detach 2 material, target 1 Xyz monster you control. Its attack becomes 4,000, but its effects are negated. Its attack becomes 4,000, but its effects are negated. It's quite cool, especially with Gagaga Samurai, because when this guy, when you summon this guy, he uses this effect on himself and then use that effect on him, he becomes 4,000 and it can attack twice, which is really cool. But also, like, in general, they're kind of cool because they're Gagagas, so they you can use them for your combos, basically. But there's actually something else about Samurai that's kind of cool, where he can protect your Dweller in the battle phase. When you're playing against Orcus or whatever, you can make Dweller in this to protect your Dweller, which is kind of funny. And also, like, even if you don't make F-Zero, this guy helps with OTK, so yeah. And then 1 Cowboy, just Cowboy for a game. And as I said, Gagagas also help with the combos. But yeah, I'm gonna set everything up for the combos and I'll see you in a second. Okay guys, one more thing before we're going into the combos. I've sorted the deck and put every card into one of 3 categories. So here we have the engine, all your combo pieces. So the combination of these cards is what makes your plays. Then your consistency cards, your draw cards, and all your searchers. Just cards that help you get to these combo pieces so you can make your plays. Oh, by the way, one clarification. I do consider Reborn and Revenge combo pieces because they achieve a very similar thing to the monsters, where they just provide another body that you can use for an Xyz monster. And then here on the right, you have your non-engine cards, your hand traps. I'm not sure what to call called by the grave. It's not an engine card, but it sort of helps you get your plays through anyhow. And then your engine requirements. So cards that you want to play, but that aren't making your combo work in the first place, or what starts your combo in the first place. So the non-engine cards makes up 8 cards out of 40. That's 20%. So statistically, you should usually have 1 card in your opening hand that is not that doesn't help you make plays. So that's not a combo piece and not a card that helps you get to a combo piece. So statistically, 4 of your cards will either be combo pieces or cards that get you to combo pieces. So, and ideally, each of these cards will get you at least 1 combo piece. This gets 2, this gets 2, this gets 2 in exchange for 1. I guess this also gets you 2 in exchange for 1. So basically all, this gets 2, but all of the others always get 1 combo piece. So in an ideal world, just based on statistics, you usually have 4 combo pieces in your hand. This is how the deck is built, and that is why there is not a big amount of hand traps and sort of interruption-based cards in here, because we need those 4 card combos. So the deck is built to provide that, and usually any combination of 4 of these cards will result in a good combo. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to show you, and now enjoy the combos. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 combos now. The first one is Utopic, Dwarf, Poncho, and Winder. So with this, what you do is you normal summon Dwarf, use his effect to summon the Utopic, use Poncho's effect to summon himself. You overlay Dwarf and Utopic for Gallant Granite, and then you use his effect to search for Gigas, and then use Winder's effect to detach the other material from Granite to summon himself, which will search Retrograde. And now you activate Poncho's effect to summon back the Utopic, use Utopic's effect to summon the Gigas. And now you have 2 options. If you go into Dweller first, you will end on a Dweller that has 2 materials and a Winder that has a Redoer that has 2 monsters and a trap attached. But if you go into Redoer first, you will end on a Redoer that has only 1 trap attached and a Dweller with 3 materials. I'm just gonna go with the one that has the Winder, the Redoer with some material. So you overlay the Gigas and the Poncho for Redoer, for Dweller, because that's what the combo I wanted to make. So whichever one you make first will have less material, and that's basically the rule of thumb. Now use Dweller's effect to detach the Gigas. The effect basically does nothing, we just want Gigas in the grave. Because now, since we control Utopic, we can special summon Dwarf with his own effect, and then Gigas summons himself with his effect. And now you can choose, of course, which material you want to use for which, but I like to use Dwarf as a material on Dweller. So I'm gonna use these two as a material on Perpetua, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna use these two for Perpetua and these two for Redoer, because I don't really care about these two, like where they are, if they're in the grave or if they're attached to something. But this I'd like to have in the graveyard, and we're about to use Perpetua's effect, so yeah. So in our opponent's draw phase, let's say standby phase. In our opponent's standby phase, oh, actually, there's one thing that I forgot. So on our turn, we use Perpetua's effect to attach the Bezel ship to Dweller. And then in our opponent's standby phase or draw phase, we can use Dweller's effect, detaching the Bezel ship, and then use Perpetua's effect to summon the Bezel ship. And then we can use Redoer's effect to attach a card from our opponent's deck to it, and Perpetua's second effect to attach Flyback to Redoer. So if we had done the other, it the other way around, of course, then Dweller would now still have two material. That's sort of the difference. Now, there is a variation of the combo if you don't, if you open, where is she? If you open Witch and not Dwarf, because then you don't search Gigas, because you definitely want Dwarf. So let's say we opened these four. In that case, it starts off the same. We just summon the Witch instead of the Dwarf. Use her effect to summon Utopic. Use Pancho's effect to summon himself. Overlay Utopic and Witch for Granite. Use his effect. Now it's important that we detach the Utopic. Use Pancho, search for Dwarf, of course, and then use Pancho's effect to bring back the Utopic. Use Utopic's effect to summon the Dwarf. And now we can overlay these two for Perpetua and use Winder's effect, detaching Dwarf from Perpetua to summon itself, and we will search Retrograde. And then we will use Dwarf's effect to summon himself, and then we will use, again, it does not really matter which you use for which, but I like to use these two for Redoer, and use Perpetua's effect, attaching the Bezel ship to Redoer. Use Redoer's effect, so we can get the Bezel ship into grave. Use Bezel ship's effect, summon itself by detaching the second material from Granite, because we don't really need him anymore. And then overlay these two for Dweller. Again, I like to do this so I can control when this goes to the grave. But it really matters, but since you control it, you might as well. And now, in the end phase, Redoer comes back, and in our opponent's draw or standby phase, we can use effect Dweller, and then in the standby phase, use Redoer, Perpetua's effect, detach one, summon back the Bezel ship, use Redoer's effect to attach a card from our opponent's top deck to it, and use Perpetua's second effect to attach Flyback to it. So, oh, of course, I feel like, where did the Retrograde go? Okay, so we sort of missed that, but of course that we would have searched with Winder. So the board is basically the same, except that there is one less material on Dweller and one less material on Perpetua. But the monsters and the effects that we can use are the same. Now, what if you don't open Winder? Since he's not searchable, you won't have him all of the time, of course. So let's say we don't have access to that. There's still a very similar combo that we can do. So let's say we opened up Utopic, Dwarf, Poncho, and Witch. In this case, we will normal summon the Witch again, the special summon the Dwarf, which unfortunately has to be in attack position, use Dwarf to summon the Utopic, and use Poncho to summon himself. Now, we overlay the Dwarf and the Witch for Granite, detach one to search for Gigas, and then use Utopic's effect to summon the Gigas. Now, we use Poncho's effect to summon back the Dwarf, and we overlay Gigas and Dwarf. This is where Redoer's effect comes in handy, as I mentioned before, because we want both in the graveyard. And if we would say we would make 2 Xyzs with these, yeah? I'm just going to show you what would happen. Say we make, since it's purely hypothetical, I'm just going to say we make Cowboy and Tornado Dragon. So if we would detach the Gigas from one and the Dwarf from the other, then we couldn't summon either of them, because now we don't control a Gogogo or a Dododo, so we can't special summon Dwarf and therefore can't summon Gigas. So what we do is we overlay both of them into Redoer, immediately use this effect, so they both go into grave. And then we use Dwarf's effect to summon itself and use Gigas' effect to summon itself. And now again, I like this to be a material for Dweller, so I'm just gonna use these 2 for Dweller and these 2 for Perpetua. And then we use Perpetua's effect to attach the Bezel chip to Dweller. In the end phase, Redoer comes back, and now draw a standby phase, we use Dweller's effect, attaching the Bezel chip, and standby phase, we use Perpetua's effect, detaching one to summon back the Bezel chip, use our second effect to attach Flyback to Redoer, and we can use Redoer's effect to attach a card from opponent's deck. So we end on the same thing, minus the Retrograde, if we open up 4 combo pieces but no Winder, this is probably the board that you will be making most of the time, because it is the combo, like the combination of pieces you will get most consistently. But yeah, oh, actually, one thing that I want to mention is that if you don't open Dwarf but you open Gigas, the combo will still work and will work the same way. It just starts off differently because you summon this at a different time. But yeah, because instead of having this in your hand and summoning this with this, you summon this from your hand with Utopic, and then this comes back himself, and then you use this effect at another time. Or you use this to summon this, and then you can do the combo the same way from there. But yeah, that's everything. There's my Dweller. Let's put her back properly. So that's it. I'd like to thank you for watching, and have a nice day.